All right, so in a previous video, I had ChatGPT take a list of data, in this case, a list of courses, just an example for it to work with. Take that list of courses and go out to the web and scrape descriptions to add to each of the courses. So basically, for each course, there's a single line and there are multiple properties. For example, here is the description for this first one. And if I split out some of this onto subsequent lines, you can see there's a publisher, there's also a link, and then we have things like a date, a duration, type, level, etc. So prior to what ChatGPT did here, this is what it looked like. There's just no description. And so I asked it to populate the description, and I asked it to do that by visiting this link, the link on each of these objects for each of these courses, to open this up here, take a look, grab the description here. In fact, I didn't really tell it how to grab the description. I just said, get it off of this page. It did a good job of doing that. It then came back and inserted that into the description. And so that's where I'm at right now. So now what I want to do, now that I had it do that for all of these courses, I think there's about 40 of them. I want to go back and make sure that there aren't any problems. And in the original video, I addressed the description and validating at least a few of them in terms of making sure the description is correct. So now I'd like to verify that the rest of the JSON object wasn't modified. For example, the title was there before ChatGPT added the description. That should not be changed. And I'd also like to know that the rest of these fields that were provided were also not altered. So to do this, I'll hop over to the command line here. And if I look at my Git log here for the last 11 commits, the commit where ChatGPT made the change, that's right here. And so because I checked this into version control, I can exploit the ability to go back and look at before and after by just comparing the prior commit with the new commit. And so that's a helpful technique, I think, if you're going to have these systems scraping data and augmenting existing data sets, even if you're just having it produce an entirely new data set, check that into a version control repository, little Git repo, and then you'll always have a history of the changes that were made. So you can go back and verify if those changes had any problems. And so in this case, I can take this commit right here with 672 as the SHA. I can take that and I can do something like a git diff here. So I can take a look at the new commit versus the prior commit with tilde1 here. And I can specifically focus on the JSON file. So if I do this here at the command line, you can see I start to get a diff here. However, because everything is compacted to a single line, which maybe that was not the best idea, but it's something that I asked for, well, it's going to be hard then to difference the original line and the new line and know exactly what changed. And that's just a limitation of the algorithms that perform a diff of a single line and try to mark the parts that are changed. For example, here's one of the problems. You can see this is in red here, indicating that it's probably changed. So if I copy this and paste this here and look for this, you can see that part of the line is actually not changed, and yet it's marked as red and green on the new line, as if it had changed. The only change here involves the description, which I think is about this part right here. So this is obviously insufficient to validate if other things were changed. You can see I get part of a match here on the end of the line. I get part of a match here on the beginning of the line, but you can even see I'm missing a word here on the end of the title. And so what I'd like to do is take a look at a different way to compare before and after, something where we could drill into just the description field and see if just that's changed. And so one way I could do that is just take a look at a different tool to perform the diff, something that could actually try harder to mark the parts that are actually changed. And to do that, I'm going to take a look at a diff tool here called Meld. I'm going to compare the exact same two commits, so before and after. And then when I run this, it'll open up Meld, get a little dialog, a GUI, if you will. And so once I open this up, you can see here I've got the lines that are changed, which is not so helpful. In fact, it's probably less helpful than what I had at the command line a moment ago, because it's not marking differences. But if I click this button here to keep highlighting, it'll try harder. And then over on the right-hand side, you can see light blue for the entire line and then dark blue for the part that's changed. And just upon inspection here, this looks like only the description was modified. I could take and copy that little prefix in front of the description here. I could search for that. And yeah, that looks like basically the changes start at the end of the word description. I could do the same thing with the end here with the publisher, but I'd like to maybe take it a step further and actually verify that nothing else was changed. I don't want to have to scan through each line and make sure that the change starts at the very beginning of the description and ends at the very end of the description. I'd like to have just a little more confidence that the rest of it was not modified. I don't want to accidentally miss one change in here. So in that case, I'll quit out of Meld, come back over to the command line, And if I want to take a look at the file after the change was made, I can use git show here. I can pass that commit SHA and then the file that I want to look at with a colon between the two. And when I do that, get the same thing that you saw in Visual Studio Code a moment ago, except back at that point in time when this was changed. And so now what I'm thinking is if I could go ahead and just strip off the description field only. So basically this part right here. If I could strip just this off, I could then compare the original file with an empty description to this after file with an empty description as well and see if there are any changes, because there shouldn't really be that many changes besides the description. So this should hone in on a very small set of differences, if any. All right, so what I'm going to do here, take that git show, and I'm going to pipe that out to sed, and I've got a pre-built regular expression substitution in here. Basically, I'm going to substitute with the S command. I'm going to look for the word description with the quotes around it, followed by a colon, and then the start of the description. And then I'm going to continue matching until I hit the ending double quote on the description. And then whenever I find that, I'll replace it with just description and then double quotes for an empty description. So if I run this now, and oops, I've got an extra pipe in here. All right, so now when I run this, come up to the top here, you can see here is the description for that first course, and you can see it's now blank. Same thing is true here for the second course. So now how could I compare this? Well, I have a couple of choices. And one of the ways that I want to look at this here first is to just run the Meld command, because I want to show you another feature of Meld that I like here. If I run this, I can start up a new comparison. And if I pick File, I can then choose a blank comparison. And if I maximize this, all right, so now I have an empty slate on the left and right-hand side. I can copy and paste stuff in here. So now let's do this over at the command line. If I take that last command that I ran and I copy it to the clipboard, I can come over here. That's afterwards, so I'll paste that on the right. And then over on the left here, just strip off the resetting of the description and go with the prior commit here, ~1. You can see that there. All right, so now if I go ahead and copy that, paste that over on the left-hand side then, there you go. You can see without the description afterwards versus before, there are only a few changes in here. This gives me a lot of confidence. So in stripping out that description field or property, I'm left with only a few differences in terms of what look like new lines. And so just like the other day when I did a demo of Smart Synchronize, you can interactively make changes to the left or right-hand side. For example, I could push this change over to the left-hand side, almost like a checklist. I could go through and make sure there are actually no other differences. I can check each of these. And yeah, those are all just new lines that were added. And now you can see it's reporting to me that the files are identical. I actually really like that it does that. Some other diff tools, it'll just like gray out the difference buttons here, for example, up here. I like that it actually tells me that, puts it right in front and center, that there's not one change that I'm missing somewhere that I just didn't scroll to. And so by doing this, I have an interactive process where I can paste in text before and after. I don't actually have to have a file on disk, and then I can make a comparison of the two sides. And in this case, I can have confidence that nothing else was changed. So that means that when ChatGPT was regenerating the entire JSON structure, all of them, that it actually didn't change anything beyond the part that I asked it to add, which was the description. And that's actually pretty impressive, because as we're well aware at this point in time, LLMs can hallucinate. And one of the things they could make up is whatever the contents was beyond the description that it's adding. It could start making things up for the title, adding new fields, or modifying existing values. And that would not be a good thing. Now, before I wrap up, maybe one way you could do this without needing to copy and paste, I'll show you this here. If I quit out of Meld and close without saving here. So basically, if I take the two commands that I ran here without copying them to the clipboard, so I'll copy this right here, and down below, I'll use Meld again. This is specific to the fish shell, though you can do it in Bash and Z shells as well. It's called process substitution. All right, so first I actually need to add Meld to my path, and then I'm going to run Meld here. And then I'll use a parenthesis here in the fish shell, paste in the command that I want to run. I can pipe that to psub, which basically enables the ability to use process substitution, whereby it'll create a temporary file with the contents of whatever this command produces. And then I can do that again here, start up a new set of parentheses, and I can come up here, take the first command that I ran, copy that, sorry for the scrolling, paste that in, pipe that to psub as well. So now we'll have a temporary file on the left with the commit before, and we'll have a temporary file on the right with the commit after, as well as without the description. And so instead of needing to copy and paste things, when I run this, This will open up Meld, make this big here, and you can see right away we have the same set of changes. And so this is just an alternative to needing to copy and paste the values into the left and right hand side. You can still go ahead and modify things here. It's still an interactive diff process, and I find that to be incredibly helpful. And so, yeah, that's it for today. I think it's important to take a look at what LLMs are producing to become aware of when they might hallucinate things or make changes that you didn't ask for. And if you can become knowledgeable about their strengths and limitations, it'll be much easier to use them to scrape things on the web and to perform a lot of advanced tasks that could otherwise take a ton of time for you to do by hand. Even with this process of diffing things and modifying the diff to make sure things are accurate, this plus the original work to tell ChatGPT to scrape the contents of the description still saved me a ton of time versus going through and doing this all myself by hand.